Good morning, everybody. I'll start today. Today's first presentation is about our personality, the way it is organized. Just as our skin is made up of multiple layers, we too have so many different layers to us. It's first our acts, our expressions, the words we speak, the acts that we do on the outside. That forms our outermost layer. And as we go inside, further and further inside, we have our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, the values that make up our character. Our external manners, what we do on the outside, these are visible to all. Anybody who passes by us on the street can see this. Some of our thoughts we share with people we know, even our casual acquaintances, our friends. We tell them what we think. Those who know us even better, they know our feelings, how we feel, what we think about certain things, even without our telling them. A few of us who know us best, they know our characters. They know the values that we value. We will be seeing more of this, the entire movie even of Pride and Prejudice later today and in the following days. If we take a look at some of these characters from Pride and Prejudice, we will see all of the different levels to which we have internalized society's values. In some, it is just a question of manners on the outside. In some cases, we believe in what we do. And in some, we actually, even our emotions, they endorse all that we believe. So we'll first take a look at this character of Wickham. Now just to, some of you might be familiar with the story already. Wickham is this really charming rogue in the story. He lies, he cheats, he gambles, and he gets away with almost anything. And that is because he is so charming. His manners are so refined. He looks so good. He smiles so beautifully. He speaks very nicely to everybody. He treats everybody so well. And people believe all that. They're taken in by these manners. He actually has been staying in this village of Longbourn for 3 months. He's in the army, he's a soldier, and when this army is posted in Longbourn, he spends a few months there. He meets this Bennet family. The Bennets have been very good to Wickham, and the youngest daughter, Lydia, actually, he elopes with this girl. He does not have any intention of marrying this girl, and he knows that doing something like this will ruin the family. The entire Bennet family will be ruined if he does something like this to the youngest girl. There are 5 girls, none of them is married. And if this happens to the youngest girl, he does not bother. He is without any scruples. But there is the second girl in this family, Elizabeth, and she has a lover, Darcy. And Darcy intervenes. He comes to this family. He catches hold of Wickham. He coerces him. He bribes him into marrying Lydia. And so the entire matter is hushed up. It's a huge scandal, but it has all just been covered up. This marriage takes place, and the entire family is quite unhappy. They are relieved that the whole thing has turned out all right, but at the same time they are unhappy with this Wickham. They can't stand him. They don't like him. But this man Wickham, he comes home. He and Lydia wants to visit her family just after her marriage. She is going away to the north of England. And before that, she would like to visit her parents and her family. And her mother is okay with it, but her elder sisters, Jane, Elizabeth, and her father, Mr. Bennet, they all completely disapprove of Wickham. But he does not care. He comes here, he acts so beautiful, he has such good manners, and he comes here, he smiles, he bows, he makes elegant speeches, he acts charmingly, and we'll see a small video clip here of Wickham, how well mannered he is, and this just shows that when these values, these good manners are just at the superficial level, they're just skin deep, not even that. This man here, Wickham, he personifies that. He is personification of very, very good manners. That was just a clip of this man, Wickham. He is so shameless. He's just eloped with this girl. He's been caught. He's been brought back, forced to get married to this girl, and the entire village knows what kind of person he is. Even the family disapproves. Mr. Bennett, the elder daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, they disapprove of this man. But though he is just so completely devoid of any shame, he can come here, he can smile very beautifully, speak to everybody, call them his dear sisters, and he says au revoir, and then he moves. Now there is another type of, there's another person in this story, the eldest daughter in the Bennett family, Jane. She is a very good-hearted, pleasant young woman. She loves to think well of everybody. She's too polite to speak an angry word or even throw a disapproving glance at Wickham. But it's not only Wickham that she is polite to, but she is polite with everybody. When Darcy and his friend Bingley first come to this village, Darcy is so proud, he's so aloof, he doesn't mix with anybody here. And Bingley's sisters, they make it very clear that they think they're superior to everybody. But she can think only of good things to say even about those people. The reason is her belief that she should be polite, she should be gracious, not just in her manners, but even in her thoughts. It's not only when people around are seeing her that she should be nice, she should be pleasant. Her idea of ideal behavior is to say, do, think, believe good things about everyone and everything. And so we'll just watch a clip of Jane. It's just after the first meeting with Bingley and Darcy, and everybody, the entire village is discussing this family. They all say, "Oh, Bingley is very pleasant, but his sisters, his friend Darcy, they are so proud, they're so superior. We don't like them." But Jane says, "No. I'm sure they're all very pleasant." She actually believes what she says. So that's another type of person we see in this story, Jane. She loves to think well about everybody. She says that to other people. She also thinks that to herself. And now, there are so many other characters. We'll see a few more, two more in fact now. Elizabeth and Darcy. Elizabeth is the second daughter in this family, Jane's younger sister, and we just saw the two of them walking, discussing their first ball, the first meeting that they have with Bingley and Darcy. Now this Darcy, he is so proud. He is Bingley's friend. He has just come to this village here. But he came here because his friend invited him, but he doesn't quite like moving with these people here. He is superior. He's from a very, very high class. These people are all villagers without much money, without any manners. He doesn't like it here at all, and he feels he's so superior to everybody. And he makes the superiority very clear. But after some time, after seeing Elizabeth, spending time with her, he slowly feels that there is something about this girl. There's something. It's not just I need to look beyond her manners, beyond her family, the way they behave. And so when he sees her values, he begins to fall in love with her. But at the same time, he is put off by her family, by her class. He is unable to accept that. And so what happens is he is in love with her, he wants to marry her, at the same time he doesn't want to marry her, and because of her family, her connections, she has relatives who are in trade, and at that time if you work, if you earn your living, if you have to work to make your living, that was considered something inferior to the people in the higher class. And so he proposes to Elizabeth, but he is in two minds. He is in love with her, but still he feels that he is lowering himself to her standard. And so when he proposes to her, this duality, it does come out. And Elizabeth, the way she reacts, we'll just watch this proposal where he proposes to her. He values her strength, her intelligence. At the same time, he is unable to give up his superiority, his pride in his family name, in the status that he thinks he has. And we will also see Elizabeth's reaction here. She is a true individual. Everybody at that time all the girls at that time, their aim in life was to marry, if possible, marry very well. A wealthy man, a man who belongs to a higher class. That was all they wanted. Her sister wants to get married, even her younger sister, her friend Charlotte is already married to this man she cannot possibly be happy with, but still all she wants is to be married, and so she accepts the proposal. So everybody at that time just wanted to marry, to settle down. They could not think beyond that. Whereas Elizabeth here, she is very clear. You may be wealthy, Mr. Darcy, you may have so many other women who would love to marry you, but I don't value you. You do not have values. You separated your friend Bingley from my sister Jane. And also I have heard a lot of accusations about it. It turns out that these accusations are false, but at the moment Elizabeth thinks that this man has no values. So in spite of the fact that she's growing older, she is unmarried, her parents cannot support her for very long, and this man is so valuable, there are so many girls in the country who would love to marry him. She says very clearly, no, I will not marry you. In fact, you're the last man on earth I will ever marry. So we'll just watch this clip. These are just 4 characters that we saw just now. Wickham with his beautiful manners, Jane with her perfect belief, her behavior we can call it, and now Elizabeth and Darcy. And the story goes on, we'll be watching it later. As society evolves, it acquires many capacities, it creates values. Living together in communities, it requires tolerance of others, sensitivity to their needs, and to be accepted by others. We have to have some amount of manners, otherwise people will tend to avoid us. There must be some goodwill, a sense of unity is required. To have some more transactions, to maybe trade with others, we should have some greater values like integrity, reliability. In order to go on and become a leader, there must be strength, there must be courage, people must trust us. These values are passed on from the collective to the individual. Sometimes it is the individual who raises a value and passes it to the collective. We get them from others, we learn, we reinforce them, we pass them on to others in our turn. Sometimes we just follow the motions because it is required of us. We may even do it unwillingly because somebody is watching. To take a very, very trivial example, if there is a plate full of sweets that is passed around, we usually do not grab the biggest piece or empty the whole thing by ourselves. We may refrain from doing so because others are watching, and much as it is tempting, we control ourselves because it's not good manners. If no one is looking, if no one is around, maybe we'll act differently. At other times, other people, they believe in what they do because they think it is the right thing to do. So that big piece there does look tempting, but no, I shouldn't take it. It's not quite right. It's not the right thing to do. Maybe for small children, okay, but I shouldn't be doing it. It's not what I am. And whether anybody is looking or not, we don't do certain things. There are a few beliefs which enjoy our complete emotional backing. We feel for that cause. We cannot even think of doing otherwise. It's not that there is a temptation that we are trying to resist, that temptation itself doesn't exist. It doesn't even occur to us. So, that in this example, we just see a very, very small case, this value of not picking up the biggest piece, it has been internalized to different extents. In the first situation, it is just an act on the outside. It's just my manners. I don't do it. I force myself not to do it. In the second instance, the mind endorses it. I think it is wrong. I shouldn't be doing it, and so I don't do it. And in the third one, my emotions are completely aligned with it. We see this differentiation in many of our acts. We internalize values to different extents. One value can be at the first level, another can be in the level of the emotions. Different people can internalize different values to different extents. There is a joke about Indians that if there is somebody who is traveling to another country, traveling abroad, when they reach the airport, they just drop the bus ticket or the taxi ticket on the road outside the airport. They get into a plane and they go to Singapore. In 4 hours they land there, and there whatever there is to be thrown out, the boarding pass, the tickets, whatever, they very carefully put it in the trash can there. After their work there is over in a few days, few weeks, whatever, when they get on a plane again and they reach India, they come out of the airport, or maybe as soon as they get out of the plane, they throw the ticket out. So how does this happen actually? When a value can be internalized, when you don't do it in one place, why is it that this happens in another place? When one is capable of following the rules in Singapore, how does one change back after coming to India? And when one is not capable of doing something in one country, how does one acquire that value in another place? It's just like a rubber band that can be stretched. Once it is released, it assumes its normal size. So when the idea of not littering is accepted simply as an act on the outside, it is practiced when one is forced to do and when there is no choice. Littering in Singapore is punishable. You can be fined for that, and so one doesn't do it there. But when this external pressure is released back in India, where the civic awareness is not developed to the level of some other places, the hand immediately just throws the paper without a thought. So in this way, there are many values which we have internalized to different extents. If you see some, I am sure you will all be able to think of some examples. I'll just give one and then we can open this up to discussion. There are some companies, some hotels, some manufacturers, people, service providers, people who, provide products, consumer products for people. They ensure a minimum standard that is required of them just to stay out of trouble from the government. Otherwise, they can even offer the best possible quality to please the customer. In one instance, you're just following the rules. You're seeing to it that you don't break the rules so you don't get into trouble from the government, from anybody later on. In some cases, we're not just following the rules, we're not seeing to it that legally we are okay. We go far, far beyond what is expected of us. This we see in so many things. We respect the rights of others. In some cases, we do it simply because it is required in the law. During festivals, when there are a lot of crackers being burst in India, there is a rule that beyond 10 o'clock, you're not supposed to do it. It could disturb others. Some people can do it because it is the rule. Others can do it because I don't want this to happen to me, and so I will do it to others. There are some other people who feel that no, this would be difficult to others, this will trouble others, so I will not do it. So I was just wondering if we all can think of some examples where a value can be has been internalized to different extents, where we do something because we are forced to do it, or we do something because I think I had better do it. In my position, at my age, given what I'm doing, given what I'm saying, maybe I should practice this also. Or sometimes we do it because doing anything else, it just does not occur to us at all. I'm sure we all do it, the people we work for, the organization we belong to, even the society we belong to. Our countries can also have something like this.
I remember an incident. My wife and I moved to India in 1971, a small town, Pondicherry. It's an old French colony. In 1974, they introduced the first traffic signal in Pondicherry. You had a couple in the big city of Madras, but this was a small place. And up until that time, the traffic was very disorderly. There weren't even that many cars. It was mostly motorbikes and rickshaws and auto rickshaws and stuff like that. But it was kind of a chaos. So they introduced this traffic signal, and they had a police force of some 30 policemen out at the one intersection, physically spread out to restrain the traffic so that they could get one direction going at a time. And it was quite hilarious because the police had to physically restrain the people who didn't even really understand the connection between the red light and the fact that you should stop. And I remember one time coming through this, that this huge police force is there, they're physically restraining everybody, and so the middle of the intersection is completely empty. And an old woman simply walks right out through the intersection because she finds there's nobody there it's very nice. She could safely cross and everybody's restrained. And I watched over a period of a couple of months, gradually, the number of policemen was reduced from 30 to 25 to 20 to 15 to 10. And at least, I don't remember, at least for a year they had 4 people there because you needed at least one at each part of the intersection to physically restrain the traffic. Shortly after that, I went back to Southern California, where I was from at the time, and it's a big place. One day I found myself in a typical situation. I was driving through the San Fernando Valley, and I came to a traffic signal in the middle of the night at 12 o'clock at night. There was absolutely not a person or a car in sight in any direction. But I stopped at the intersection, waited for the traffic light to turn green, and then went on. And that was really very typical behavior. I was not unusual in that regard. I mean, there may be a few youngsters who would, but most adults would think 3 times, even if they know there's no policeman anywhere in sight. So it brings it to mind these, and of course now that traffic signal is there in Fundy. I think there are many times where there's no policeman. But what would happen in the middle of the night to traffic if they come there and there's nobody in sight? That I don't know. So these are things we take for granted and don't really realize how much we are internalizing behaviors or have come to accept them. The other thing that comes to my mind is the discussion we were having yesterday about taxes. Because I had, Alberto was telling me over lunch about how he pays the taxes when in very many places in his country, and that's not all alone, people don't even feel it's wrong to evade the taxes, and certainly that's equally or more true in India. More true, I would say, that many people still don't know that they don't believe they're supposed to pay the taxes. In the U.S., I don't even think it's out of a great high morality, but I think in Alberto's case, he's got an option, and he can consider, and out of his clear internal values, he decides, I'm going to pay. In the U.S., I think for most people, I'm not talking about the rich people who hire the lawyers and figure out how to evade, but I mean for the ordinary people, I don't think they even think about avoiding the taxes. Maybe because our sense of I don't know why exactly, but I don't think most people every day they pay their taxes every year and think, well, could I have avoided it or anything? If there's a legal way to get out of it, they will. And of course, we pay most of us pay our taxes online with accounts that are never audited or questioned by anybody, and we go through our life that way. Of course, if you get caught, there are penalties, and the penalties can be quite severe. And I don't think it means the Americans are more honest in that regard. I think it means that a certain value has been internalized, or a certain behavior is internalized.
This relates to me about value and taxes, because, for example, in my country, it's actually a situation in all Balkan countries. People trying always to avoid to pay taxes. But it's actually the state is not here to help me something. If I need to pay something, I hope the state help me, give me security, give me a health system, give me something. But most people are not satisfied with the state system, of course. And I'm not sure if this is a question of the value or is it a question of to be afraid of system of parenting.
It may be complex rules. When I first came to India, because it was quite a contrast from the U.S., where we really never thought about avoiding the tax, and I wondered about it, and then it occurred to me, taxation in India was something that the British government did. And the idea of government itself was something that you're forced to submit to, not something that represents you. And I'm not trying to idealize it, and maybe Alberto's lived in the U.S. a long time, he may have a different perception. But I'm just talking as a typical American way. I never thought of the government as somebody who's trying to impose on me. It's my government, and therefore I have a responsibility to pay. Whereas in India, government means it's something coming after us. And of course, when you talk to the government officials, it's the same thing, because they feel it's their government and they're going to come after the citizen. It's not service. Whereas if you call up government offices in the U.S., typically, it's not the way they behave overseas, by the way, not at the embassies at all. They're just the opposite. They're horrible. But if you call up most government offices in the U.S., you really get a feeling that they're there to serve you and that they know that they're there, that you're really the customer. It's a different. So there are a lot of factors involved in it, and of course, how a country goes to that point of getting the people to identify with the government and the government to identify with the people, so that the values are internalized, is itself a big subject in itself.
But in this moment. But in this moment, it's actually not the question of value, it's the question of responsibility. Because I think that in the Balkan countries, and Croatia is not an exception, is the question of responsibility something that is actually in the first line of all this state. Because without responsibility, without responsibility of the state, of the government, of the parliament, of the citizens, nobody take responsibility. If you want to cut something, some taxes or something, all are satisfied. Yes, we do that, but not in my case. And it's without responsibility.
Yes.
Many people don't go to vote because they say, doesn't care if I go or not, it's the same situation, this party and this party are everything the same, as politicians, but actually without responsibility, you need to go to vote and vote against them. And this is actually the problem in this part of the world, because people vote mostly against something, not for something, always against something.
This is another dimension of between the individual and the society. What is the relationship between the individual and the collective, or the government, which is a representative of the collective? It's not the whole thing. It's interesting. And maybe you can comment, because in India, though the attitude to the government is, we keep as far away as we can. That's not the society. The society is the family or the community, and they have a level of commitment to their family and their community or their caste or friends, and he was my schoolmate 30 years ago, that we certainly don't have in the U.S. We identify more with our government, maybe less with our society, which is really... So I think that where those relationships are may vary. Maybe, Alina, you can comment, because when I went the first time to Moscow in '89, we had grown up in the U.S. with a real stereotype of the whole people behind the Iron Curtain, and as people who were without emotions and without relationships and without affections and everything. And the first time I landed in Moscow, the thing that overwhelmed me was the emotional intensity and personal goodwill of the people I met. And it was an overwhelming experience. I almost had the feeling, my God, we have the characterization that I had as a youngster in America about the people on the other side of the Iron Curtain was more true of Americans than it was true of the people we, perceived as our enemies. And when I came to this country for the first time, and came to Belgrade in 1989, I had exactly the same feeling. So that relationship between the individual and the society is more complex than it raises some very interesting.
Yes, so I don't have experience of Moscow, but I can say about
my
country, and I can speak from inside the country. This is what you tell about is also felt inside because we compare Ukrainians with Europeans, for example, and we feel that our compatriots have much more open emotionally and much more friendlier than the Europeans. And a very bright example of it is, for example, many Europeans and Americans, they go to the psychotherapist to be cured from some emotional diseases or to be listened to and to talk to somebody. But in our country, this is not so very popular because everyone has a soul friend to whom he can come and tell everything, and this is the decision of the problem. There are many other examples, and yes, this is also what Bogdan Religion always likes to say, that nowadays when Ukraine wants to be part of the European Union, but there are many things that the European can learn from Ukraine. I'm not speaking about Russia because there is a difference with the behavior between our two peoples. Yes, so this is quite what you say.
I think this distinction is really interesting between how people behave on the surface, and that's what you're showing. Vikram is perfect on the surface. I mean, many people have told me that the Americans are the friendliest people in the world. Many people say that, but that means if you're walking on the street, they may say, how are you? And the girl at the traffic, the checkout counter, the person will be courteous and friendly and all. But if you just pierce one step behind that, well, that's my life and this is your life, and it's very difficult to get behind that surface. So I like this because it makes it clear there's a difference between the way we behave on the outside and the way we either think with our mind or really feel with our emotions. And that's a huge...
Yes, this is also another difference. But while Americans look very friendly, Ukrainians and Russians especially are considered to be so severe people, not smiling. That many Europeans and Americans are really afraid of, like they think that they're cold, not able to be sympathetic, and so on and so on.
I found this is exactly what we thought, and I found it's exactly the opposite. That when you really get to know people here, the relationships are much deeper, and maybe it's as you go east, that was one of the cultural revelations in my life. Going to India was one of them, and the other one was coming to the east. Incidentally, it works in the other way too, because when I first went to Moscow the first number of times, we had an interpreter there, a young woman about your age at that time, and she was not very happily married, and she had a daughter, 6-year-old daughter, And the Americans who she met, she was meeting lots of professors and everything, were so friendly to her, and said, well, why do you stay here? The country's having so much trouble. Come to the U.S. and we'll get you a job and everything like that. And she left her husband, left her grandmother, her mother had died earlier, and moved to the U.S., went and did her postgraduate work at Iowa State and got a job there. And when she said she was doing it, Elena was her name, of course. And I said, please think twice about this. Just because some Americans come and are friendly to you, I don't know if you can live in that atmosphere. Because I feel the density of the emotional atmosphere here, and it's not the same for most of us in the States. And she went, and she had tremendous psychological problems. I don't know that she's ever overcome them, because the outer life was so pleasant, it was so easy, it was so lacking in fear and obstruction, but the inner emotional support was completely lacking. So it's another dimension. Very interesting.
I have a question for the presenter. Janani, what you think in terms of the internalized value over history of killing your enemies? It seems to me, but I don't know if my impression is correct, that while in the past the majority would pride themselves and underline their capacity to invade another country or territory or tribe, kill the man, take the woman in slavery, and hoard their possession as proof of being proud of it. Nowadays, most of the people actually are ashamed to say exactly what is the point. Like United States going in Iraq for the oil, a strategic reason, and justifying it as wanting to bring democracy. And so like it seems to me that slightly there is a still world affair in turmoil, but some value has been internalized, and so you do crimes, but you are considered crimes, and so you hide that and justify as that it was their fault, it was in defense and all that. And also, if that is true, isn't that also explaining the horror that some groups, like ISIS, are going back and are taking pride in beheading their so-called enemies in public, proud to do something that most of us, I think rightly so, consider horrendous.
Yes. One is absolutely right. Earlier, whatever we were very proud of, now we are ashamed of, and that I think shows how we have evolved from the lowest, from the physical level. We have actually become more refined, more cultured. The statistics proves this. Before there were formed countries, out of every 100,000 people, as I mentioned on the first day, 500 were killed in battle, and that slowly came down, and now it is less than 1 per person. So statistically this is true, and also now we are more and more ashamed of doing such things. Like what happened to this Pakistani girl, Yusuf Zar Malala, has been happening to thousands of women all over the world, not just in Pakistan or Afghanistan, but everywhere. But today, when this happens to one person, the entire world comes together, supports her, elevates her. And so this does show that we have all internalized a lot of these values. So many practices that that have been there in India, like what happens to women, how widows are treated, child marriage, so many things now seem abhorrent to us. Even when I read about Indian history, I wonder how people could have been like that. Slavery, which was common actually, has now when we think about it, or discrimination, we know that till I think some 25, 30 years back, it was still practiced in the world, in South Africa. Now, there will be some people who have truly not overcome that feeling, But as a whole, as a world, we now think that apartheid is totally abhorrent. So in this way, our values have become more and more internalized. We have become more refined. We have moved above that level. And if you see all these, the games that used to be played earlier, these the gladiators and then the bullfighting and all that, all these were actually one of the reasons they existed was to teach people, to discipline them, to condition them, to tell them, look, if you step out of the line, this is what will happen to you also. This was one of the reasons there were all these games. To educate, they had these violent games. To force people into behaving. And today the things that we do to teach people what is right, what is wrong. We have schools, we have education, we have very, very nice, even computer simulated games which teach people what is right and wrong. So we use stories to tell people what's right and wrong. All of these games which we now consider so violent, there are so many people who are now lobbying to totally ban bullfighting. It still does exist. In India, so many such violent sports have all been eliminated. One of the reasons these games were there was to educate. And now we use such refined methods to educate our youngsters. And so in this way, we see this change in everything. We have become more refined, more cultured, we've become more progressive. There still are deviations, that is there, but still the overall direction that we have been following is actually progressive. In some places it is, if you take the enrollment of girls in education in some sub-Saharan countries, it is equal to where US was 200 years ago. Today, girls in Afghanistan are celebrating because they are allowed to ride a bicycle. But still, overall progress is definitely there. There are differences between regions, but the direction, as you said, it has been progressive.
And would you say that as we talk of personality for individual character, structural traits, that the same basically could be said for countries or culture or religions. And if that is so, I'm very ignorant, but there are religions like Jansenism, and people wear masks because for them all sort of life is sacred, and so they wear a mask to avoid swallowing mosquito and little insects, and wipe before their feet in order not to crash beetles and insects. While there is other religion, like in the Bible, at least in the Christian version that I know, is that animal and plants are just commodity created to serve people's needs. So, wow, totally different. It seems that in Jansenism says there is democracy in life. Every life form has its own rights. And at the same time, I'm aware that in the ecology movement, where, in religious and culture adverse to recognizing that everything alive has the right to be alive, are emerging forms, sometimes even extremists, of protecting animal rights, preservation of nature, which is, again, it seems, what you think, that in that kind of structural personality, or structural culture, or structure of national identity, that you identify that you are not just human bodies, but that you are an ecology, and so that the alive things that don't have a human form is still you, because you identify with life, not just with human life. I don't know if you have some comment on that.
It just reminded me, Jainism says one, Christianity says another. I was just thinking in some cultures, in some countries, nodding is yes, shaking your head is no. In some others, it's the other way around. So that basic difference is there in everything, but identifying with life form and everything, there are apart from Jainism, there are some other religions, some other faiths that do actually identify this. Rather than, I am not sure I would call, this better, that better. It is different ways of looking at a life form, but yes, they do have their place. In fact, yesterday we were discussing that the human body is host to microorganisms that outnumber the cells, they outnumber the living cells by 10 to 1. Without these, we could not survive. And I think you mentioned by weight, they would be 2 pounds. If we were to take out all the human organisms from inside of us, it would be 2 pounds in weight actually, and without them we would not be able to survive. We couldn't digest without all of these in us. So the more we recognize it, actually the more conscious we can become, and the more conscious we become, the more power we also are able to have over it. If you're totally blind to it, then we lose out on a lot of power that we can actually get from being conscious.
Ashok has a question. Let's give him that.
Okay.
Let's hear from him.
Okay.
Ashok?
You have described manners as the outermost superficial aspect of our personality.
Yes.
But I am amazed to find that imperfection in manners can seriously mar a person's accomplishment.
Yes.
Normally, I would suppose that it is values that decide a person's accomplishment, and if somebody has formed a lot of positive values, his rise in life is assured, and if he doesn't have the proper values, his accomplishment is seriously marred.
Yes.
But actually in life, even a person who doesn't have proper manners can find his accomplishment seriously damaged. So how is that? Manners are superficial, but decidedly they have such a powerful impact when it comes to career and accomplishment. I am a little confused.
Okay.
Repeat the question just to be sure everybody understood.
Oh, okay. So, the question was, if manners are so important that they are able to help us become successful, achieve success at a high level, then what about values? Because it is values that really matter. Manners are only on the outside, they're just a physical appearance. Do they matter? Can they make a difference? Can they make us successful? What about everything that is inside of that? So that was the question. Actually, that is absolutely right. Manners is only on the outside, and basically it's just the beginning of this presentation, but since we've been discussing, we've spent a lot of time on this, but beneath that, manners are on the outside. And just beneath that is the behavior, what I believe, what I think is right, what I think I should do. Like when we buy a product, no, we don't go in for the packaging of whatever the salesman does. If he looks very nice, if he smiles very beautifully like Wickham, we don't buy it. We look at the product inside. So the product inside is, we could say, the behavior, and what's on the outside is only the manners. So manners help us become a part of society. They make us, they make everybody accept us, and we can move in society with the help of manners. Beyond that would be what we believe, what we think is right, how we act, whether we are true, whether we mean what we say. Those would be the behavior. And if you go even further, when our emotions completely back what we say, we are totally honest, we don't do it because there's some compulsion from outside, because somebody says, oh, this is what you should do, otherwise I'll disapprove. There's no compulsion from outside, the compulsion is from inside. I don't do it because anybody expects me to do it, because I accept it, I do it. So that is the value, that is the highest level actually. And in these video clips that we just watched, and the links of which have been given in webinar, we see Wickham is at the level of manners, and we know what he accomplishes. He's just about accepted by society. He has to just keep up pretense. He always is on debt, and he borrows in order to carry on. So that being accepted by society, that much comes from good manners. And if you go beyond that, like Jane, she is happy, everybody accepts her, she gets to marry Bingley. So that is the next level of accomplishment. And once we totally internalize these values, we make them our character, we believe in them like Darcy did. Here he says, oh, you belong to this lower class, but once he says, no, I was wrong all this while. It's not class, it's not money, it's not prestige, it's not the size of your estate that matters, but it is one's values, what one believes in that matters. When he changes, and when Elizabeth goes even beyond that and says, I don't respect anything that society respects just because it says it is a value, I have my own internal values. So once you go far beyond the manners, we accomplish at a much, much higher level. So manners is just the outermost level, but that itself does help in getting us accepted by everybody in society. But as we internalize these values more further and further, our accomplishment actually only rises.
In fact, Darcy gets into trouble because he lacked the good manners. No, that's how, I mean, that'll come out when you see the movie, but it was, manners may be very superficial, but the absence of the minimum manners on the road we can lose our life. If we simply, I'm using the word manners, but you know what I mean. If we simply violate a simple traffic rule, that's enough to endanger our lives. So I think it's interesting that, and Ashok's question brings it out, it's not that one is valuable and the other isn't. Manners have played a powerful role in making the society work. And if all of the American success in customer service in it. Yesterday morning when we went for breakfast, we ordered food and after 15 minutes nothing had happened, and we asked the waiter and he said, that's not my responsibility. It's with the kitchen. And if we'd had a choice, we would have gotten up and gone somewhere else. That's just at the level of manners. He may not really care, but he could have said, I'm very sorry, sir. I see what can be done, or it'll be here in a minute, which it was anyway. But so everything has its value, and it's interesting to see how society has helped build up us from the outside in, but the individual comes in the measure we internalize it. I think that's what you're...
Yes.
Go ahead. I know we've taken a lot of your time, the presentation.
Yes? Yeah.
Okay, maybe I have put it's a little bit down to that point of avoiding taxes. I think avoiding taxes is also a very financial aspect because it's very expensive to avoid any taxes. Multinational companies have conditions to avoid anyway illegal way taxes. And for a person, it's not possible to look about the complex laws to avoid taxes. I think avoiding taxes is a much more expensive thing than responsibility or having not, or I'm accused. It's a little bit too much of financial aspect. And second thing, it's all about the example of Jerry waiting on the traffic light there. If you look on history, maybe it's very visible in India or very old in Germany or in the US. But if you look about the future, how about would be the order if you are thinking about driverless cars? And you have a lot of choice to think about, is it possible to pass through the light traffic or not? You have to do it.
Yeah.
Like an order.
Well, the more sophisticated your social organization becomes, the more essential the minimum is. Like the credit card system. The credit card system is a fantastic system all over the world, but it only works when people pay their bill. When the people, when a merchant accepts the card, he knows he's going to get paid. It can't be 90% of the time, I cross my finger, 90% of the time I actually collect my money. It works and is so powerful because it's flawless. And I think that's your point. As society gets more sophisticated, the minimum standards it requires in order to function, like on the internet, we can't modify HTML. If we want to communicate, we've got to follow the standards. So society's capacity to develop depends on its capacity to develop each of its members to be able to function and to be willing to function at that level.
It's the first thing having laws for testing driverless cars since 2 years, maybe 2 years, 3 years. California state has established some laws for having Google drivers to all the German automobile companies follow these laws, and they put about this how we can drive in California with driverless cars. So in future maybe you don't have to think about it.
Great. It shows how the society is evolving and how critical this is. Without these levels, the society can't evolve. In India, if the banks, the government wants the banks to give money to the farmers for agricultural credit. But still in many areas, the value of the farmer is whatever money we get from the bank, we have no intention of repaying them. Well, that severely restricts the capacity of the government or the banking system to extend credit. The value of credit is when you can keep going back for more, not you get a one-time windfall. But because they have not yet acquired, I'm talking at the rural areas, in some early, they've not yet acquired the commitment, the behavior, the commitment that if I take the money, I intend to repay it. It prevents the society from extending a certain level of benefits to them. So the two go hand in hand. Go ahead.
Manners is just an act of the physical body. They are the minimum condition for moving successfully in society. And when we go to the next deeper level, we can call it level 2. I'm just naming it behavior. It could be called by another name. Instead of a number, I thought behavior is better. And now, when a salesman, he promises that his product is of very high quality, it will last a lifetime. We don't buy it because the packaging looks very good. People did not buy the Mac or the iPhone because it came in a very beautiful package, or because the salesman speaks very beautifully, he looks good. There is faith in the spoken word. Napoleon, he dismissed England as a nation of shopkeepers, but it was because the English gentleman, the stereotype English gentleman, had this reputation of keeping his word. He was always true to what he said. It was because of this faith in his word that trade thrived in England. It required actually faith in the person in order to give him credit, in order to buy any product from him. So that faith, when we know that the external appearance does reflect the intention, we have moved to the next level. So behavior, we can call it action based on belief. It requires a personal commitment. When the person believes that this is the right thing to do, it's no longer an act of the physical body, but the mind supports it. And if accomplishment can help us get accepted by society, this is more true. Accomplishment depends on our willingness to mentally endorse our outer experience. So anybody who wants to succeed in work and with human relationships, we know, has to have this positive behavior. And now we go into the next level, to a deeper level, to the level of character. This is when the emotions have completely accepted an idea from the mind. Now in this case, it's not just an act, a physical act. It is not even something that I think is the right thing to do. But there is no choice here, no weighing of options, no alternative, no plan B. When a person has completely internalized, committed to the value, they act not because it is required by society, not because somebody expects them to do it, not because anybody will, condemn them if they don't do this. When we're talking about tax is a good deal, some people pay it just to stay out of trouble. Others do it because, they think it's the right thing to do, but still when they write out the check, there is this pang that, it's all my hard-earned money that's going. But still there are others who do it, who idealize paying tax, who cannot think of doing anything else. They do it because they have accepted it completely as a value, this thought, this idea. It's no longer just in the conscious mind, but one's emotions are fully behind it. One has accepted it, this conduct to the point where all of one's energies, one's emotions are behind it. We know some people who, even we may not be, capable of coming late, of telling a lie, of cheating anybody, or speaking a mean word. There are some, even as when they are children, they cannot copy in exams or cheat in a game. Some people don't think of offering a bribe, accepting a bribe, or making a false promise, something they don't intend to keep. Here there is no external compulsion, whether anybody is watching or not, listening or not, whether it will be found out or not. Even if there are to be no consequences, that person would still act the same. There is a community in India, in South India, called the Natikote Chettiar community. They are very wealthy. If we go into this community a little bit and study what it is that made them so wealthy, we see that there is this belief among this community that unless they repay all their debts, not just their debts, but the debts of their parents, of the previous generation, they will not flourish, they will not prosper. It is not just a practice that they follow. It's not something that they do out of any compulsion. It's part of who they are, what they are. It's almost part of their religion. And because they are like this, anybody will willingly give them money. They have access to credit. They have a very high credit rating because of this character of theirs. And so they are able to actually prosper. So we see a very direct relationship between a value that is internalized to the level of character and the high level of success that one sees in life.
Not just prosper, they become, a tiny community has become fabulously wealthy because I think the tradition there is if the father borrows money and doesn't repay it, the son's first obligation in life is, before he does anything else, is to repay the debts of the father. So anybody will lend them money because
they've flourished, they've expanded their business to the rest of Asia and now to the rest of the world. A tiny community has flourished, has become so successful. It comes from that value that they have completely internalized. So the more we internalize a value, when it's just manners, okay, you're accepted by society, when you think it's the right thing to do, and when it is just a behavior, at the level of behavior, if you internalize this value, you can be successful. But when it is part of your character, when the value has all your emotional backing, then it takes you right to the top of any field. And we see this character not just in individuals. Communities have it, organizations have it, companies can have it, entire countries can have this. So we can think of a number of companies which actually have a particular value. When Google says, oh, in China the government is actually hacking our account and it is not allowing us to respect the privacy of the people, then we will pull out of China. That shows a character at the level of the company. Literature is full of such examples of characters. Lincoln, we just heard about yesterday, he was called Honest Abe. He had that character of honesty to him. And now we will just go to a fourth level before I conclude, that of personality. Manners make us part of society, behavior ensures our growth, and positive character takes us to the peak of our accomplishment. But character is fixed. It is like the skeleton, it provides strength, but the highest level of accomplishment, it requires not just inflexibility, it requires creativity, deconditioning, unlearning. There is a limitation to conditioning, but when it's totally unlimited, you can achieve in any field. I put up this image here of all of these crops because it signifies the green revolution that took place in India. And we had a freedom fighter who after independence became a statesman called C. Subramanian. He was called CS for short. He was one great character that India has seen. When he was made the agriculture minister, he brought about the green revolution. And he actually eradicated famine, hunger in India. He prevented a famine at that time in India. But then he was not just limited to that one field. After that he was made minister for mines, for steel production, for defense, for finance. Whichever field he was in, he rose to the top. He was able to bring about change. And so, with character one achieves in one field, but great personalities, they achieve in multiple fields. They have the capacity to adapt to different situations. What they have achieved in one, they are able to take it to another, to translate their values to suit another field. And so, character is required to rise to the top in one field, but if something new has to be achieved, personality is needed. Personality can accomplish something original. When a fresh response, when a new industry has to be created, when something totally new has to be created, then it is personality that actually is required. We see this in this American can-do attitude. It's not a can-do in just one field of technology or in just one field of agriculture. Whatever it is, whatever the situation, this can-do attitude, this was seen in when Kennedy said, we chose to go to the moon. As if he had a choice. At that time, there was no technology to take man to the moon or make him land there safely or to bring him back. The Congress said, no, this is too expensive. His scientific advisors, he appointed a committee and said, now study and tell me if this is feasible. And they said, better not. But he still said, the Americans choose to send a man to the moon. So this, I can achieve anything, even if it is something that has never been attempted before. We choose to make a man go to the moon. At that time, it still is possible. It is because of this personality. When one is at the highest, at the fourth level, at the level of personality, it is not just in one field that we can rise, but in multiple fields. And personality has the capacity to respond freshly to any situation, to attempt what has not been done before. But there is still one step further, that of individuality, which we have been hearing about since yesterday, and I'm sure we will learn a lot more about. So it is at the level of the individual that much greater accomplishment is needed, and that will be the subject of another lecture.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or any more questions or comments on this? So you described something like an onion skin with the manners on the outside and several layers, whatever we're going to call them.
Yeah.
Several layers of greater intensity and integration going back in. And interesting. Okay.
There's a wonderful man, in fact, a master of multiple martial arts. His name is Cameron Shane, who created a cross-discipline where he integrated meditation, yoga asanas, the posture, and the martial arts for a complete system that he calls Budokan, that is the warrior's way, the way of the warrior, but he's speaking being spiritual warrior, and transforming the exertion of physical energy to martial arts, especially that is defined by masculine pathway. He turned it into something that is sublimating the internal life and things like that. That has been an element of martial arts ever since, all this time. But he takes it into the modern world, and he's this really interesting teacher where he could walk into a yoga class and be funny and play hip-hop and have you practice in the midst of those conditions. There's no awing as such, or just having to create this atmosphere, because he finds that that's not something you're going to find in your everyday life. For example, in America, so if you walk into the streets, you need to be able to practice internally, in your mind, in the midst of, pop culture, heat of the day, or cold of the day, or rush of the hour, or whatever it is. So he says something very powerful. He says the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And as simple as that, and as complex as that. And the idea of layers that I really, really like, but he, with that notion, kind of ties them all together, so that we kind of resolve the idea of hierarchy and the notion of what supersedes another, that they all function and they manifest in everything, in the smallest act of, whether you have a sense of having to repay your debt, keep your word if you give it, if you feel internally tied to that by your own word, more so than what anybody else asks of you, it is tenfold more powerful. If you are going into, when nobody's watching, that's the whole point, when nobody's watching, are you going to throw the trash in the street or not? and how you're going to behave. This comes from really ancient Indian wisdom as well. If you want to know a man's politics, you need to just look into his sex life. The way you behave at those most intimate internal places is going to somehow be reflected if you're going to have violent or disregarding or selfish politics or anything like that. And to go back to something that Elena and I have thought together on the very first day, the notion of what you taught me was downshifting, and when I correlated to another story at the peak of your power, where you feel the yearning and the call to go deep inside and to go into what we have called underworld, just because a lot of those things to be faced are scary. And when I spoke of the restoring of the order of care, starting from the fact that women are caregivers, so for once can we pay attention, and on and on and on. One of the most powerful things that I find about that, is that, for example, some people might have the privilege of shedding their riches to go and embark on this journey. And I think the heroes are these amazing people that in the noise of every day of having the child on your hips slobbering and screaming for food, and you need to shower or go to the bathroom, then in the midst of that, you're a spiritual warrior, aware of what you are practicing in the moment. So there's something very, very, very noble about people that, unlike myself, stay in the country in the midst of madness and continue to be noble. And there's something marvelous to be said about it, that, Jesus Christ was an extraordinary revolutionary who spoke about compassion and turning the other cheek and loving the neighbor thousands of years ago. So, and what's fascinating about, say, if you think about the movie, The Last Temptation of Christ, and the novel of Nikos Kazantzakis about it, that he was not really crucified, that he chose familial life. And out of that, whether we dispute it or not, what happened with Jesus Christ historically is of less significance, as much as it is to think that the cross is not something that happened to one man one day in marked history, in that that's a human condition in which every day you're crucified between duty and desire, between aspiration and the immediate needs, and on and on. And that you are making daily commitment to the Christian path. If that's what you choose, then that's a whole other discussion, with institutionalized religion. But the condition of crucifixion, as terrified as I am of having to follow a boring myth of somebody dying for your sins, I'm not so sure about that, but that this is the beauty and gives back the dignity to every person to say that your condition is that on a daily basis you're crucified and you're greater for that. And we honor your basic humanity from there. So that's something powerful to me, that the way you do, to quote this master, who's very funny man, who's very playful trickster, that he says the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Okay.